What's up, y'all? This is the Adapt or Die podcast, a podcast that explores new and relevant ideas for the purposes of self-growth and helping you live a more fulfilled lifestyle. My name is Armel Tala.
And my name is Ben Smith. We're two university students pursuing our own journeys of self-growth with the hopes of sharing our findings with you.
Welcome back to another episode of the AOD podcast. In today's series, we're going to be exploring habits, but more specifically, the science of habits. And Ben, what is going to be the key takeaway of this episode?
Key takeaway, we just want to understand how habits are formed, how they can be broken, and what makes it easier or more difficult to form habits. So that's the goal for today.
And we're going to break the illusion that, one, guys, when you're forming habits, stop thinking that willpower is going to do it. That's going to be a biggest misconception. And that's honestly where we should just start right away and just break that misconception.
Let's just hop in.
Yeah, for sure.
I actually have it's actually kind of a funny experiment. It's not that funny, but I think it's a little funny. They got a bunch of university students.
Yeah.
And what they did is they made them not eat. So they told them they couldn't eat for 5 hours before coming into the experiment.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was like 50 or 100 of them maybe. And they split them up into two groups. So the two groups, they split them into different rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And for one group, they actually set out radishes and cookies for both groups. Obviously, you're like, radishes. Yeah, same. I was like, I'm not going to eat a radish.
Yeah.
But for one group, they told them, you guys can eat you can eat as many radishes, as many cookies as you want.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get started soon, whatever. And the other group, they said, you guys can eat as many radishes as you want, no cookies. So they couldn't eat any cookies. Keep in mind, they haven't eaten in five hours, so they're hungry. Like most people, you get pretty hungry after 5 hours. At least I know I do.
Yeah.
And then so after that, so they left them in the waiting room for like 10 or 15 minutes with the cookies and their delicious radishes. And then they shuffled them to a different room and they gave them an impossible puzzle. Okay, and what the point was, they wanted to see how long the university students would keep trying to complete the puzzle.
Okay.
And they found that the group that could only eat radishes, they gave up almost immediately, like just within like minutes.
Yeah.
They were just because they were hungry and they were tired and they were just screw this, whatever. It's just like some dumb experiment.
Yeah.
And then the other group that had cookies, they were actually they were socializing as they're doing their work, like they're having a good time. They were going on, like no one knew how to do it because it's literally an impossible puzzle, but they kept trying for like a few hours at least. And the point of that experiment was to show that willpower is it's not something you can. It has outside factors, basically. Like if you're tired or you're hungry, like in that example, your willpower is greatly diminished because they spent all their willpower trying not to eat the cookies that they couldn't have any willpower to do the puzzle. I thought that was kind of...
So it's like you have, and I've heard this idea of concept of like your willpower isn't something that's like unlimitless. It's not something that you could just keep. It's actually a limited amount. You have a limited amount of willpower. And honestly, like the way I would almost view willpower is like just a small thing to get you started. Yeah. It's more of like a small thing to get you started, but it won't keep you from, continuing. It won't keep you from fully building that habit.
I know I always... When I was a kid, I used to think I was like Kobe Bryant or something in the willpower department. I thought that I was just like, I'm going to wake up at 6 a.m. and I'm going to get 2-hour workout before school. And then I'm going to do this and then this and then this. And
that's exactly how.
And every day never made it all. Like,
no, that's
ever.
Exactly. And even me too, me starting this like self-fulfillment journey, I was like, you know what, Kobe Bryant talk about mindset. So I'm going to just go in with a strong mindset. I'm going to have the willpower to do it. Nope.
Doesn't work like that.
Does not work at all. But that's why we need to explore the science, because it actually becomes so much easier to build these habits once you understand how it actually works. It becomes so much easier to solve a math problem once you understand what the equation is saying. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Like there's rules there's universal guidelines for how our biology works. Mm-hmm. And if we're fighting against our biology to try to build habits, then we're just making it harder for ourselves. Yeah. So the best thing to do is just to look at the science, and then we can gather some information and then just go with, like, we can just function with how we naturally function, instead of trying to just like brute force, like, I'm going to do this. Like, no, you're not going to do it.
Simplicity, the simpler you can make things, the easier it becomes, right? So
definitely.
And it's just about understanding. So what about willpower makes it so weak though?
It's not that your willpower is necessarily weak. Everyone's willpower, I think willpower is like a muscle. So willpower is, it's kind of like your bicep, right? So if you let's say you did like you just went to the gym, right, and you just worked out, you're probably not going to be able to lift as much right after you work out because you just worked out, right? Yeah. So it's similar in that, like, your willpower is generally strongest at the beginning of the day because you just woke up, like, you haven't spent it on much, whatever it is. But as you get to the end of the day, I think that's why we always we kind of slow down at the end of the day, because we spent so much energy trying to do work. Maybe you had a problem with your friend, or I don't know, whatever it is. Like, you're trying to eat healthy, you're spending your willpower on XYZ, and then by the time like 10 o'clock rolls around, your willpower is just spent, and you don't want to do any work, you just want to go to sleep. That's why we eat like late night snacks, whatever. Like, so willpower is definitely, it's like a muscle. It really is. And you can strengthen that muscle, but it's important not to use that muscle religiously to try to think that's
habits. The only way. And it's more like, and honestly though, like, so this is kind of an example I have, right? You have your willpower, but let's say you have your physical strength. Your physical strength has a limit to it. Sure, you can pump out 350 at the gym, right? But moving a boulder, like, why do that? Why would you sit there, spend so much hours and effort trying to do that, and you won't get anywhere with it, really? So, but instead, what you want to do is you build instruments. You build things around you to help you make that process easier. And that's kind of how you have to view building habits. There needs to be these we're going to talk about a concept called reward based learning.
Yeah, do you want to take it?
Yeah, let's dive into like this, because honestly, I was doing the research on this, and everything that comes up every time I was researching, every article, every video that talked about when it comes to building habits, there's 3 parts of habits, and like, the whole cycle. It's the cue, meaning like something that's going to trigger you to want to do that, right?
Is that like is it like external? Like, what is the cue? Give me an example.
Okay, so the first thing I can think about is like tying your shoe, right? Tying your shoe. Okay. So when it comes to tying your shoe, you see your shoes untied. That's the cue. Like brushing your teeth, you see, you wake up, the bad breath.
So it's like a visual thing.
Yeah, it's more external. Yeah, like you said, it's more external. It's something that, and I mean, the cue can be internal as well too, but more specifically, it's easier if it is external. But
right.
So you have a cue, and that tells you like, okay, this is, it's time for me to start this habit. Like, okay, my shoe's untied. The behavior. Then the second part is the behavior, and the behavior is you just going about doing the action or whatever.
So it's like whatever the habit is.
Yeah. Okay. So you go tie your shoe. And now the reward is, and then this kind of sounds dumb, and when we talk about rewards for building habits, it doesn't have to be like, oh, I get a piece of candy at the end, or it can be something as to avoid a situation as you don't trip on your shoelaces. That's the reward of you tying your shoe. And you don't think about it that way because we've been doing it for so long. But if you never knew like you're supposed to tie your shoe and you're always tripping, like you're like, oh, what the, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. So it's like, and it's very important to understand that almost about half of what we do is habitual, is from habits. There's a saying about it's about what 40 to 45% of our daily behaviors are habits.
That's actually an insane percentage.
It's actually, but if you like think about it, eating your food, that's really a habit. Like you don't consciously, anything you don't do consciously is something you've done over and over again, because what is a habit? True. Yeah. So because what is a habit?
It's just like a repeated action.
Yeah, basically. It's a repeated action that you do.
So I know you were telling me about this earlier, but why do we have habits? Like, what's the purpose? What's the biology behind why habits?
And this is why the reward based system is so important when it comes to these things, because I'll tell you guys a nice little statistic. So habits free up our brain to learn new things and be able to focus on certain things, because our brain is an energy zapper, right? It needs a lot of energy, and to this day, our brain is so brilliant because it optimizes and it makes things really efficient. Because if you need your brain, like what? Let's say this for the average adult in a resting state, the brain consumes about 20% of the body's energy. That's 20%, 1/5.
I think your brain is like, I think it's like less than 5% of your body weight or something. Like, so like the calorie like intake that it's taking for like how much like percentage of your body. Yeah, that's crazy.
And think about everything else that's happening in your body too, like your stomach digesting, your heart beating, blood vessels, all blood flowing through, like everything else. your brain being less than 5% your body weight, being it's not a very significant part of your like biggest part of your body, but it's consuming 1/5 of your body's energy. So your brain, and you guys, let me state again, for the average resting, this is you in your resting state. So when you're doing tasks like taking a test, you're doing tasks like, anything that requires you to think a lot, be active, like anything that requires your brain, a lot of brain, energy and stuff like that, it's probably up to, you told me something about how much calories it burns.
I came across some video or statistic a while back, and it was basically they like studied chess players at like chess tournaments. Like these are like insane chess, like these are like top tier chess players, right? Yeah. And they tracked how many calories they burned in a day just playing chess. And what they found was over the course of a whole day, right? They're in a chess tournament, so they're thinking very, very hard. They weren't moving though. And they're eating a lot. Yeah. And I think they found they were burning 6,000 calories a day. An insane, I don't know if it was exactly 6,000, but it was significantly more. Like the average person eats like 2,000 to 3,000. Like you burn that many a day. Like, and they're burning like at least 4,000 or 5,000, if not 6,000 or 7,000.
And so that's to emphasize, our brain needs a lot of energy in order to do things, and especially specific tasks. So at your resting, you're taking 20%, and at you're active, it could be up to.
So how does habits play into that though?
So habits play into this because now your brain wants to be efficient. Like if you're always having to think, like imagine if you had to think really hard about brushing your teeth, getting up and like, putting on your clothes, getting up and eating.
I would hate life.
You would be so exhausted by the point or eating breakfast. It's like 3-4 hours of your day and you're already like energy zapped. So your brain needs to be efficient. And so what it does is it uses this thing called a reward based system. And practically all habits is a way for your brain to kind of it's a
compartmentalize.
Start to put things together, right? So when you're building a habit, the neuron pathways, the neural networks, you build these neural networks that become stronger and stronger as you repeat it over and over again. And what it allows the brain to do is automate that task.
So you're saying that like habits, like
it automates it. So, and it's like
you use a lot less energy.
Yeah, it's just so now the brain it's like an automated system, right? It becomes more efficient. You don't have to think about it as much. So that's why habits are subconscious, because you're not thinking about it. You're just happens. It just happens. Therefore, saving your brain a lot of energy so it can focus on different things. And what the reward based system does is it gives each of your habits a different reward value. Right, a reward value that determines what is most important, because your brain decides what a habit is based on the like how rewarding it is and how much repetition you do. Right. So that's why the reward based system becomes important, because there's a value to it.
I think I read somewhere when I was doing the research for this that when you finish like a project and like it's like you're like really proud of your project and you feel very happy and like satisfied. Your brain releases dopamine when those things happen. And I think, actually I know habits are very similar to that. Like your reward is actually dopamine being released as you finish a habit. And it's, that's why it's like heavily reinforced, I think. Yeah. So you have the cue, and then the behavior,
and the reward, and that's that dopamine.
Hits. And it can be very simple. Like literally, I think, even tying your shoes or doing very simple things, even the dopamine hit is much less than if you were doing something that almost like your guilty pleasure. If you're on a diet and you hit a late night snack and you get some cake, like that would be a heavy dopamine reward, because it's a habit to eat dessert. It is, for a lot of us.
Exactly. But, and that's the play. Dopamine plays a huge part, and that's why like dopamine control. Like when people say, you hear a lot about dopamine being bad, but it's actually really vital for us in order to continue living, because it helps our brain decide what is important, what do we need to do. And again, this plays into habits, because as you're building this, as your brain is figuring out this cue, this whole cycle of like, okay, this is a trigger, do this behavior, and then afterwards this is dopamine effect. And when your brain starts to tie that behavior with the reward, it actually becomes that's how cravings actually come. It's like there's this crazy thing where like your mind starts already associate like being like, oh, okay, I'm about to do this action, so the dopamine already comes and happens and makes you be like, oh, that's why when you go to the movie theaters you crave popcorn, because that's the reward of going to watch a movie. You're eating popcorn, you're saying obviously watching the show.
I don't know what food it is for you, but whenever I see donuts, my mouth immediately starts salivating. Like just like I'm like, it's like my brain is like dangling a donut in front of me. Like, oh, I know you want the donut. Like, and that's like, I'm imagining myself eating a donut, and that makes me like crave the donut so much more because I want that dopamine hit. I want that, like, because I don't know, I just love donuts low key. Like they're actually so good.
Yeah, and to because I feel like I'm kind of stretching the point of this, but let me just kind of hit it home here. So
bring it home.
When it comes to reward based system, right? When it comes to reward based system, think of it as like set and forget, right? So your brain takes in all this information, what you're doing at the beginning, right? You're building the connections between your neurons and between those neuron pathways and everything, and as it's building, it's getting stronger. It's to a point where your brain's gonna become a habit, and now think of it as set and forget. Your brain's gonna it's set its reward value, and your brain acts upon a behavior based on its reward value, right? So like cake, like sugar, and stuff like that, they have a high reward value because our caveman ancestral brain is like, it's based on calories, right? And we want calories to survive. But the thing is, and cake and reward, they have a lot of sugar and therefore they have a lot of calories. It's artificial though. So that's the difference why it's unhealthy. It's artificial. We made it weigh so much, but that's why cake, like eating candies and shit and stuff like that, it goes high in your reward based value because it's just naturally inclined, right? But so your brain sets and forgets it. So it's like, that's how it becomes an automated system. It sets its reward value and says, okay, this is important. So we're just going to be doing this X, Y, Z. And we're not even going to think about it. And that's why it becomes unconscious, subconscious. But then, so you go, okay, and that hints to you a lot of like, it hints a lot on like, how do you end up breaking these habits then? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
How do you end up breaking these habits? And you need to break, and a lot of people think, let's start by thinking the behavior, right? So they think about the behavior part of it. The second part, like, okay.
That's true. And they're not focusing on the trigger and the reward. They're missing those, aren't they?
Exactly. Focusing on trigger and the reward. And honestly, if you focus on the reward too, changing the reward value, because if you think about it, your brain stops taking in information about the value of that reward and just said, okay, this is what we perceive it to be valuable, right?
Right. So let me just like stop and like recap real quick. So recap real quick, just so I can get everything down in my head. We have a trigger. Yeah. We have a behavior, and then we have our reward, right? Yeah. And so you're saying that our reward is basically continually like reinforced.
Or your reward, the reward reinforces the behavior itself, but it doesn't change the reward value. Like that reward value is set. That's why it becomes automated.
So you're saying like I like a certain habit based on how much reward I feel like I'm getting. Like
how much dopamine is released. As in like it's gonna set, like if you always like candy and you never think about how bad, you never really are conscious about how bad it is, like that, it's gonna be a very high value thing to you, and you're gonna naturally be inclined to.
So you're saying like high dopamine, like high reward habits are very like strongly embedded, right?
Yes, the higher the reward, the stronger the habit.
I think we basically call that addiction, low key. Yeah. I think that's what it is. I think like people who like smoke, or who people who do a lot of things that are very addictive. Yeah. I think they have their reward value is so high that you get cravings. Yeah. And I think that's what that is. So we have that recap. We have that set. If I'm trying to break a bad habit, okay, what would I do? Like, how do I use, what's the science behind breaking a bad habit? We know how to form them.
So the science behind it is, as we said before, your brain is it's not going to take in any more information about that habit. It's not going to want to change its reward value. So how you end up breaking it is not to focus on the behavior, but focus on the reward value that's attached to it. And the way to change that is to be aware. And it seems almost so simple. You're like, what do you mean to be aware? Like, obviously I'm aware it's bad for me. Like, no, it's not about being aware of like what the behavior is and how bad it is. It's you need to be aware of how your brain is associating that reward value to the behavior. So when you're doing a task, right? I'll give you an example.
Yeah, I was gonna say, give me an example, because that'll make it a little clearer for me.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So say you're smoking cigarettes, right? Okay. As a child, a lot of people that smoke cigarettes as they get older is because they started when they're younger, and their brain associated a high reward value for that behavior. Because as a kid, you're smoking cigarettes because you want to be cool. You think it's cool. Okay. But like cigarettes is a different thing because it becomes addictive too. So it's like it automatically, and then the dopamine is even stronger then. And as a kid, since you started that way and the dopamine becomes strong, it overtakes you, and then it becomes a habit at a point. And again, your brain sets the reward value for it and forgets about it. So when you become aware, and you have to focus on the awareness while you're doing the action, right? So the way you can change the reward value is to focus on on the on focus on how it makes you feel, on the reward, on the feeling you get from that reward, right?
Okay.
So in a study that was made, I can't remember specifically. I will link it in the link. I will link in the description below. But so they said that they told people, don't think about stopping yourself from smoking cigarettes. Think about how it makes you feel once, like, be aware while you're smoking the cigarette.
So like, don't even like.
It's like,
don't even try to stop yourself.
Of course, like, you want to try to stop yourself, but like, if you do it, like,
but like, the goal is not to.
Yeah,
to
the goal is to focus on that. Is to focus while you're doing it. Be aware of how it's making you feel.
That's interesting.
Because once you're aware of how it's making you feel, and you're older, right, and you're just more, conscious about it. You know it's bad for you. Everyone that smokes cigarettes knows it's bad. Like, nobody, like, you're not.
No one's debating that.
Yeah, no one's debating
it's
that.
Pretty proven.
So it's like, so if you know it's bad for you, then why? Like, obviously that tells you it doesn't stop it. You need to be aware of how it's making you feel, and the dopamine, and like, not exactly dopamine, but be aware of that reward it's like making you feel. So once you start paying attention, what they seen was when people were paying attention to, like, when they were smoking, how to make them feel, they were like, wait, this is actually, like, it smells nasty, it's disgusting. What you're doing is now you're unplugging the automated system of your brain. It's saying,
so you're
like,
changing your reward value.
Yeah, you're unplugging it from automating. You're saying, hey, look, stop. We're not just gonna do this and forget about it. We're gonna actually unplug. We're gonna actually take in information. Now you're allowing your brain to taking information about the reward that you're getting, and it's changed because your perception has changed of it. You're like, this is actually nasty, like, and therefore your reward value starts decreasing. And when you're talking about, like, eating healthy, once you start eating the food, right, and you're thinking about, like, oh, this is actually help, like, you start feeling like, you become aware, like, oh, I actually feel good the next day when I ate that. And you're allowing your brain to taking information now, so it can update this reward value, and therefore it decreases it in its I guess in the hierarchy. So now you're like, okay, well, smoking cigarettes is bad, and it drops. And remember, the higher the reward, the greater the habit. And your brain is going to choose to do the action that has the highest reward value. So once you're able to take in that new information, unplug it from being automated, right, and then you update that reward system, and then you finally and that's how you actually break the habit and form it to a good one. So that's how you play with the reward.
That's very helpful, because I've been trying to eat healthy, like, as much as I can. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I fold.
We all fold.
Yesterday was a great example. I was at Main Event, and they had this pizza, bro. It was actually for, like,
I went to Main Event.
Yeah, that was so fun.
That's lit. Lit.
They had this pizza, and then on the way out, they were like, "Y'all want to get some Dairy Queen?" I was like, "Yo, a Blizzard?"
Yeah,
a Blizzard would hit so hard. So I folded, and I had actually a pretty big Blizzard too.
Mm-hmm.
But so you're saying, like, all I need to really do. I know it's not just like, it's not like,
it's not
cut and dry.
It's an overtime thing. Okay. It's like,
so I need to be aware of, like, when I'm eating it, like, oh, like, this is going to make me feel kind of bad the next day. Like, I know my acne might get worse if I have this. Mm-hmm. Like, and it's not like I might, gain a little weight, like, exactly. Whatever. Like, so I'm decreasing my reward value just by being aware of the negatives.
Yeah. So it's because, like, awareness helps break your brain from that habitual, like, autopilot, right? And then and it allows your brain to take in that new information. So, and it's an overtime. It's not going to happen immediately, right? And one thing that helped me, because when I actually was eating pretty well over the summer, and I was eating these candies and stuff. And I'm a big candy person, and I'm always eating candy. And without even thinking about it, I didn't know about this idea of, like, the reward based system that we had. But I remember I was eating it, and I just like kind of I was becoming more aware about what I was eating, and I was just kind of like, yo, this actually isn't that good. It's actually making me kind of sick. And then it actually started putting me off. Like, the same feeling I got from eating those candies was not the same. And I'm telling y'all, there's these things called sweet tart ropes. I could eat 4 of them in a day. But then once I started learning about being healthy, when I started learning about being more healthy, and when I started learning about being more healthy, it made me more aware of what I was eating. Therefore, it like subconsciously, without even thinking about it, without even realizing what I was doing, I was rewarding that reward. I was updating the reward value I get associated with the candy, and it became more disgusting to me, and it became so much easier to avoid those candies. You know what I'm saying?
Right, because it's not even hard for you at some point, because you're just like, I don't even want this. Yeah. You're just kind of like, this is not helping me. I don't realize,
really like
this.
How it's not as good as it seems. And and what helps is, obviously, since everything is relative, I needed to actually eat healthier foods, eat healthier things, and realize, like, oh, those actually made me feel good. Like it wasn't that bad to eat. And so when I was able to actually be like being aware that, oh, look, relative to like all the other stuff, it's actually not that great, you know?
Right. So we kind of have this this general like very nice model, I guess, for how our habits are formed and broken. I have a few like very helpful kind of side things that I kind of want to go over.
Yeah.
So one habit that I always heard, one myth, it was a myth, is that habits take 21 days to form. And that's, I don't know where that came from, but they did a study, and the basic outcome of the study was that habits take anywhere from, I think it was 18 to 254 days to form. And that varies. It depends on a variety of things. You know, how hard is the habit? How ingrained is that the bad habit you're trying to replace with a good habit?
Yeah.
How ingrained is that into you? You know, your reward value for certain habits. Like all those things play a factor. So the point in that was just like habits. It's a process. It takes a while to form a habit. It's not gonna, Rome wasn't built in a day. Like it's gonna take a minute. But and then another thing I want to go over is there's actually something very powerful in tracking your habits, and not just tracking them like on your computer, but like getting a large piece of paper or so, like a poster or something, and writing out like rows and listing your habits and tracking them visually so you can see them every single day wherever, like when you're in your room.
I want to bring up like that's another thing of awareness. That's what you're doing when you're tracking. You're increasing your awareness of that action, which is kind of, it goes back to it, but keep going on.
I mean, they did a study, and all they did was they gave people a way to track their habits, like a visual way. And they just told them, it was based on diet, because a lot of the habits science is focused on being healthier. But they gave them various ways to track their habits, and they found that the people who track their habits the most, like they who were the most consistent tracking their habits, they were much more likely to stick to the habits, and they actually lost about, I think, 8 to 10 pounds within like a few months. And the things they gave them weren't like life altering. It wasn't like go work out every day. Like it was just like try to eat one portion of vegetables a day. Try to cut out 100 calories of carbs, like very simple things, like not like, and they didn't follow all of them every day. It was like 8 things, I think. So these are very like easy, applicable, just drink more water, things like that. And the fact that simply tracking them made a huge difference. Even within different individuals, they found that the people's 2 most consistent weeks when they tracked their weight, they lost the most weight during those 2 weeks, with almost every single person in the study. And I thought that was really interesting. So
and I want to add to that point, like, because I was also watching something about you starting small, small steps, because one, tracking it helps you raise that awareness, but also like 2, as you're starting off smaller, it makes it easier to obtain that habit, right? You get like your philosophy is getting 1% better every day, doing that one small thing, because as you start, because like you start a new habit, right? And a lot of people are very big, and one thing they said was like, if you want to build a new habit, like you want to be as specific as possible.
You need to clarify your habits.
Definitely. You need to clarify, like, what is it exactly you want to do? Not just I want to meditate for 5 minutes a day. And starting off small like that, I want to meditate for 3 minutes a day, it makes it where as you're doing it smaller and smaller, it makes it easier for you to not do it, but just get used to it, getting used to the convention. Like, I can actually do this. Like, I almost want to.
There's 2 really important points of why you would want to start small with your habits. And this kind of works for like a lot of things. But the first is that motivation is not, it doesn't stay with you. Like, like some days you wake up and you're really, really motivated. You're like, I'm going to go to the gym. Like, I got it today. And then the next day, you're not that motivated. And so one of the reasons that you would want to set your habit goals to be like fairly minimal is because you want to be able to have enough motivation to hit that goal every single day, no matter how much motivation you have. Like, if it needs to be something that's so easy for you that it's really like, if you don't do it, it's like really, like if and it can be very simple. It can be meditate for 30 seconds a day, which, you're like, does that even do anything? It's not really the fact that you're meditating. It's more just kind of getting used to it. You're just building some foundation of getting used to sitting down and just being still.
Let me put this into perspective. Maybe it can help people. As in, like, so you think about it. You start with meditating 30 seconds a day, and you try to do that every single day. Yeah, 30 seconds. You're like, I'm not really feeling much. I'm not doing much. But what you're doing is like, one, building that routine of it, but then like also kind of just establishing like you can do it. It becomes something where it's like it becomes so much easier to start, and like it becomes so normalized when you start smaller, because you're not thinking, man, I'm taking 10, 30, 40 minutes out of my day to do something like this. I'm taking only 30 seconds. And then once you start doing it over and over, you're like, I can actually do more.
And
I want to do more.
It reinforces you, you know, like it. And so like the beginning, a lot of habits, you know, you pick a habit because it's good for you, right? You know, you want to meditate. And we can do a whole episode of meditation because there's so many things. I love meditating. But you pick a habit because you think it has value, right?
Yeah.
So when you do that, I actually just lost my train of thought somehow.
You pick a habit, it has value. But and things like that, like, so if we, and I want to talk a little bit more about, because I don't feel like I hit enough home on when it comes to like the neural pathways that you're forming. So when you're like doing something as small as that, right? You're doing it some everyday repetitiveness. You're practically forming a greater connection between all these neural pathways that's like taking place, because it's like, okay, this one thing is happening triggers this other thing, and then all these parts in your brain as electricity sends over, and you're strengthening it over and over again. So starting small allows you to easily strengthen that instead of starting bigger, where it's like where it's important, because if you start smaller, it's easier to do it over and over again, because repetition is so important. It's the most important thing for building habits, and that's what strengthens your neural pathways. Instead of thinking like you can just start big where you're inconsistent, those pathways aren't getting strengthened, because you need to be repetitive and consistent.
And that kind of goes back to motivation, like we said, like your motivation, your willpower. Your willpower is kind of like a muscle, you know. So if you're flexing your willpower muscle all day, and then now it comes time to you know, maybe your goal is to meditate half an hour for 30 days. Half an hour is a very long time to meditate. Like, it's hard. So if you come around at 6 o'clock and you're supposed to meditate for half an hour and all your willpower is spent, then you're probably not going to meditate, right? So when you're making these goals, if they're very achievable, you know, 2 minutes is not hard. But if you work up to 15, 20 minutes over the course of a year, which maybe it sounds like a long time, but if you think about it, you're going to get results from meditating just 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
And so it's like you're starting that process like early, you know what I mean? And it's going to have a domino effect as you keep going, and it's just going to positively reinforce. So if you do too much, too fast, you're actually far more likely to fail. You're
actually pushing it away, because it's like, I'm not going to, because for me, when I would start with it, I'd be like, okay, let me just start by, you know, trying to do 20 minutes a day of meditating or 10 minutes a day of meditating. And it's just, some days it just becomes so much, right? It becomes so much, and it's hard because it's not a part of your habit yet. It's not habitual. It's not something you're doing constantly over and over without even thinking. It's something that you have to think about. So if you have to think like, okay, I need to wake up and do something, and you go, I need to wake up and run for an hour, all right? Or I need to wake up and run for 10 minutes or walk around the block. What is more likely you're going to do on every single day consistently?
You're going to 10 minutes around the block walk. That's so easy.
And then once that 10 minutes of walking becomes a habit, it becomes easier then to fill it up, to increase
exactly.
It becomes easier for it to increasing. And I'm saying this like I knew this automatically, but just taking this time to research for like 2 hours and figuring this out has just opened my mind up. And of course, Ben has been telling me this, so I'm not even gonna lie. Like I'm the one who came up with this profound idea or something.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked at habits for a long time. They're very interesting to me, because I think that the value they provide is immense. Like you said, the fact that nearly 45 or 50% of your day is essentially automated by your habits. If you think about that, if you set that automation, if you can control that automation, then like we said, like, you know, like 1% better every day, if your habits are helping you get 1% better every day and you're not even thinking about it, then you're gonna move towards success like very easily. So I think it's just starting small and realizing that like you can't do everything, and you're gonna spend so much willpower trying to implement 10 habits in a day, and you can't do all of that. You just have to start very small and work your way into everything.
It's almost in a way like the way I almost want to view it is like compounding interest, right? Because you start small and you're like, okay, well, it's, you know, it's 5 minutes a day. Like, we're gonna go back on the meditating example. It's 5 minutes a day. okay, whatever, you don't really see much effects as it, you start off, but then 5 minutes a day becomes so easy. You're like, I can do 10. Like, I can, like, honestly, what am I doing for that extra, 2 minutes, or like that extra 5 minutes that I'm not doing? And then you're like, okay, I can do 20. And then it just starts to compound upon itself, where it becomes so much easier. You start to see so much benefits from it. And then you're like, I want to do this more and more, where you finally get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm doing 30 minutes, an hour of meditating every day. Has become consistent. It's become a habit. I don't even think about it. I wake up, roll out my bed, XYZ, bam, I meditate.
And you know where I see this effect like very easily? I don't know if you ever watch like transformation videos on like Snapchat, but it'd always be like some skinny person, and then they'll be like, skinny person gets ripped in like 2 years, right? And you watch it, and basically what they always say is like, yeah, like I didn't have much confidence when I was younger, in high school, middle school, and then I started lifting and I saw results, and I just kept lifting. Like I wanted to, like, I just wanted to see those results continually. So like it was the initial, like you said, like it was seeing those initial part of the results, and then because they were seeing the results, they were actually positively reinforcing whatever habit it was. So if you're doing meditation, like you just said, and you're seeing that you're more focused, you're a little bit happier, maybe you're a little more emotionally stable, and then you see all that, you're like, yo, like I could do this a little bit more, like this would help me a little bit. It's easy. And one idea I want to hit on is this idea of familiarity. So when you're doing something, and I think the gym is a great example for this, when you're doing something that's unfamiliar, it can be very easy to feel embarrassed. So let's say you've never gone to the gym before, right? And you go to the gym for the first time. If you've never lifted weights before, you're going to be very self-conscious when you lift them, because you're going to be like, oh, everyone's looking at me. Like, I don't really know what I'm doing. Like, I don't have, like, I'm not as fit as everyone here. Like, I don't know how to do this. And that creates a lot of friction, because there's a lot of, you're very unfamiliar with your surroundings. You don't really like where you're at. And a large component of that is actually social. This is very interesting. You're worried about how other people view your time in the gym, and that people think like much less of you because of that. And so one way that you can easily build habits is by trying to take some of that unfamiliarity and some of that friction out. So maybe instead of trying to go to the gym and just dive right in, maybe just start getting at-home workouts for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes every single day. Just get used to working out at the same time every day, and build that habit. So that way, when you start going to the gym, or you can do a different activity if you want to. People love to hike, or if you have a favorite sport, you can do that instead, because those things are fun, right? So they create less friction when you're doing them, and they make it much easier to build habits. So instead of trying to fight and be like, like, I'm Kobe, like 81 baby, like I'm just gonna do it all right now. Like, no, like just understand that it's much easier to build habits if you're just going with what you already know, because then you can build off of that.
And I guess that's really to say that I've taken in so much information, and to want to understand, like, your brain itself is is like this thing of inputs and outputs, right? Your brain is gonna take in a lot of inputs, a lot of things like like, oh, I'm doing XYZ, over and over again, and being like, okay, that's important. Because once your brain sees that, oh, he's brushing his teeth every day, that must be important, so bam, put that as a habit. You seize that, you do an over and over repetition, over and over again, then it becomes really important to you.
And even good habits, like, you get a dopamine hit out of those too. Like, if you build a habit, like, in things that are hard, like things that are, like, I think at this point, like, I exercise like 5-6 days a week, and it's just like, I enjoy it. Like, it's so fun. Like, I obviously I don't, I do, like, I do random stuff, but I really enjoy the way that I work out, and I actually really much, I look forward to it. It's actually one of my favorite parts of my work week, my day, and it's I get a kick when I finish it, my workout. I'm like, like, I feel good about myself. I feel good that I was able to make some progress today, and it really reinforces the next day. So once you get into that positive habit loop, then you're kind of set. As long as you don't try to make too many jumps, as long as you're not trying to leap way forward in the habit, then you're just easily going to keep chugging along until eventually the habit is just basically completely automated.
And I want to come and wrap it up to a conclusion about, one, how you can take this information of science and apply it to try to take it real quick, and then also and answering the question of, okay, we talked about building habits. How do you break a bad one? But number one, I want to say, you guys need to understand, don't think of a habit as something that is just going to happen. Think of it as a cycle. And it's the cycle of you constantly trying to reinforce the cue, behavior, and reward cycle. So you need something when you're trying to think about creating a new habit. Think of something that's going to make you want to do that habit, right? What is a cue that's going to be like, okay, I can associate this to make me start doing this. And then finally think of like, well, be aware of what is the reward you're getting from it, right? You don't have to say, I'm going to work out and then go eat a piece of candy after, like that. When we say reward, we do not mean it needs to be a physical reward. No. You need to think about the benefits and being aware of it, because as you're doing it, at the end you associate like, okay, I just finished working out and I know this is going to make me feel great. I know XYZ, like I know, you become aware of like what are the benefits, what are the repercussions. It's going to help reinforce that. So thinking of habits as less of like an action that you can just do at once, but like, man, I want to start working out every day. Not like that. Think of it as a cycle, and as a cycle that almost like a snowball too. Like start small, and as it spins, it goes, and you're reinforcing that cycle. It just becomes bigger and becomes easier to move down. And
that's a great analogy. To move down. Yeah. Just because as you keep going, it's just gonna get easier and easier, and then as the snowball gets bigger, it's actually gonna be much harder to break the habit too. So once you've built a good habit, the habit is generally set unless you actively try to break it, or you somehow just get off your routine and eventually or you replace it with a different habit, a bad habit.
And that's where we go. And so your brain sets and forgets it, right? And that's to bring up like, and that's also how bad habits are formed too. You do something so much over and over, blah, 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 it becomes bad. So how do you go about breaking these bad habits? Again, we're going to talk about, I'm going to bring up the reward system, where you need to change the reward with it. But, and another thing that I would add on to it is, you want to instead of you trying to completely get rid of a bad habit, you want to replace it with a new behavior, right?
Yeah. Like getting rid of a bad habit it's almost impossible, actually.
Yeah.
You have to replace it with a different habit.
Yeah.
Because like if you habitually, let's just take smoking, for example. It's going to be very hard for you to just clean cut, like stop smoking. Instead, what's going to be easier is if you find something else to try to replace smoking with.
And I want to kind of bring this example. I don't know if I brought about a lie. I talked about how, okay, so there's this thing when it comes to smoking, how it can't form for some people. It's so someone seeing a lighter and a pack of cigarettes can be a cue to want to smoke, right? So they see the lighter, pack of cigarettes, that's their cue. They do the behavior of smoking, and the reward they get is the dopamine, that just nicotine, whatever cigarettes gives you. And then eventually they don't even need that pack of cigarettes anymore in the queue. They see, and then they can associate a lighter and being bored, and then smoke and whatever. And then they can associate, then finally it just comes down to them being bored, smoke and whatever. But to think about in this situation of a lighter, if you want to like replace the thing of smoking, maybe you can think, if you see a lighter, I want to light candles instead, something. And I know this is very it's trying to fix something as complex as cigarettes, and it's actually an addictive thing. But to think that you want to kind of see where you can plug and play it. And again, like we said earlier before, thinking about the reward value that your brain is giving, be conscious, be aware, because awareness is what's truly going to help you break this habit. So remember, guys, awareness overcomes deception.
I knew that was coming.
Awareness overcomes deception. But do you have any concluding thoughts for this episode?
No, I just want to make sure. So, like, just a quick recap. We have habits are formed, or they take place. We have a trigger, cue, reward. If we want to break habits, we'd like to replace them with new habits by taking advantage of our reward value system. And that's kind of the general gist of that. And then we also have willpower. Willpower is it's muscle. It's
not as significant as you think.
Yeah, you can like.
Instead of using it to get started, but
instead of using willpower to build a habit, use it as motivation to start a habit. And then, like we said, small steps are going to be key here, because
it's a snowball effect.
You don't have, we all, some days you're just going to wake up and you're just not going to be able to follow through. But, and that's fine. Like, it's going to happen someday. So that's the recap. That's all we really wanted to go over today.
And thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of the Adapt or Die podcast. And remember, awareness overcomes deception. See y'all see y'all on Thursday, because we will be dropping, and to hint, we will be dropping an episode where we've talked about a lot of applications here, but we're going to go deeper into actually how can we take these, what are some tips, tricks, but also like what are some real legitimate processes that can be used for you to use to break and build good habits. So thank you guys again for listening to this episode of the Adapt or Die podcast. Peace.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Adapt or Die podcast.
For more information about us, follow us on Instagram at Adapt or Die, or find us on TikTok at AOD Podcast. You can also watch the podcast on our YouTube channel at AOD Co, spelled AODCO.
We hope you enjoyed this episode, and as always, continue to explore and adapt.